Episode 24, how long should a story be? This is a question that I'm asked over and over again. How long should a story be? And you know what? It's a good question. It is. But the answer is tricky because there is no one right answer any more than there's a right answer to how many slides should be in a PowerPoint deck or whether you should always begin your presentation with a joke. And no, absolutely not. You shouldn't begin your presentation with a joke or by visualizing your audience naked. Okay, so now we got that out of the way. Welcome to the Storytelling That Sticks for Business and Life 20-minute podcast. I'm your keynote and story coach, Doug Stevenson. In this podcast series, I'm going to share with you some simple and practical storytelling techniques and holistic approaches, tips and tricks from my over 25 years delivering hundreds of keynotes and training courses, telling stories that worked and stories that didn't work, long stories and short stories, and the lessons I've learned from teaching storytelling skills in boardrooms and breakout rooms, on corporate campuses, and from delivering keynotes in hotel ballrooms and huge convention centers in front of thousands of people. My main goal here is to give you the tools that you need to choose, craft, and deliver stories in a way that makes them stick. Stories that sell you and your product or service. Now, in this episode, I'm going to give you some guidelines, some general guidelines and ideas about how long your story should be based on the different situations you'll find yourself in. Now, of course, these are only guidelines because there are no rules for this. And if someone tells you otherwise, they don't know what they're talking about. I'm basing these guidelines on what I've observed, both as a storyteller in different situations and from observing hundreds of other speakers, some of them professional speakers like myself, but many of them non-professionals, business people like sales and HR managers, CEOs, CFOs, CLOs, and CMOs, community leaders, business owners, and folks who deliver sermons and political speeches. Think about it. If you've only got 10 minutes to deliver a speech or a report, that's a whole lot different than when you've been invited to deliver a 30 to 60-minute speech at a conference. Now, if you feel that you learned something valuable from this or any of these podcasts, please click on the follow or subscribe button. All right, well, let's get into it. The reason this topic keeps coming up, because there are people out there posting videos, people who've never given a paid speech in their life, saying that your story should never be more than 1 or 2 minutes long. I mean, come on. These people have obviously never been paid to deliver a motivational keynote in their lives. What they're probably telling you is that based on their own biases and opinions, they don't like it when someone tells a long story. They're uncomfortable with it. So they're telling everyone not to do what they don't like. Please hear this. There is no hard and fast rule about how long a story should be because it depends on the situation. Now, I'm basing my guidelines on decades of observing what works and what doesn't work, not based on what I like or don't like, but based on what works to hold people's attention, what listeners and audiences respond positively to. A story that's being delivered in a boardroom in front of 10 executives is a very different situation than a story being delivered in front of 900 people in an annual conference. I've spoken in both situations, and in a boardroom with a bunch of executives staring back at me, I tell shorter stories than I do in a keynote on stage in front of 900 people. In a boardroom, I might tell a 3 or 4 minute story, but on the keynote stage, I tell my longer 9 to 12 minute stories. If you've been listening to my other podcast episodes, you know that what launched my professional speaking career was my streaking story, a 14-minute story, a hilarious story about going streaking and getting arrested naked. I call it my $1 million story because that story has made me well over $2 million in speaking fees. Now, some people would say, you can't do that. No audience is going to sit still for a 14-minute story. Oh, really? Really? Well, I did it and it worked. And I'm not alone. I've watched hundreds of professional speakers tell stories anywhere from 8 to 12 minutes all the time, and they get paid to do it. The key here isn't how long the story is, it's how brilliantly crafted and delivered the story is that makes it work or not work. If you suck at storytelling, if you don't know what you're doing and haven't invested the time to study and implement storytelling craft and technique, then a 5-minute story is probably too long. It is a fact that some people are naturally gifted storytellers. For them, storytelling comes naturally, but for everyone else, great storytelling can be learned, just like any other skill. You can become a great storyteller by learning how to do it. You just need to study some simple tools and techniques. Now, if you want to invest the time and energy to take your story seriously, and I think you do, one of the things I recommend is you go back and listen to episode 2 of this podcast series, Story Analysis, where I discuss my 9 steps of story structure, a traditional storytelling formula adapted to business that makes it easy to craft your story in such a way that no matter how long it is, it holds together. It's easy to tell and easy to follow because of the deliberate approach to the sequence of the story elements that makes the story compelling, but that also allows you to use the story to make your point. As I was considering how to approach this topic, I had just watched a movie, and I was starting to think about movies and how long a movie should be. What's the ideal length for a movie? Why is one movie too long, even though it's only 90 minutes long, while another movie at 3 hours plus is not too long? So consider this, the movie Titanic. It's 3 hours and 15 minutes long, and it's one of the top grossing movies of all time. So is it too long? I don't think so. Avatar is 2 hours and 58 minutes long, basically a 3-hour movie, and it is now the top grossing movie of all time. Neither of these movies seemed too long to me because of how well they were made, how they worked, and they were dramas. And for some reason, the more emotionally compelling a movie is, the longer it can be if it works. Now, I find that to be true of my stories as well. The more emotionally compelling they are, either by being hilarious or dramatic, the longer they can be and still work. Now, on the other hand, the more cerebral they are, without the emotional core that makes a story work, the shorter they need to be. I keep coming back to the same place. Story length depends on the situation, the context. How much time do you have to make a presentation? And are you a professional speaker who can devote the time to craft your story? Or are you a non-professional and the context you're speaking in does not allow you to tell a full-blown story theater story? One type of short story that you can use in almost any situation is a vignette. A vignette is a short illustration or a brief description of an incident that makes the point or teaches a lesson. A vignette can be anywhere from 1 to 2 minutes long. So if you want to make a point about excellent customer service, you can share a short story about how you were at a store or a restaurant or an airport or someplace, and someone took especially good care of you. That only takes 1 or 2 minutes. The same can be done for poor customer service. Combine the good customer service story that may be 1 or 2 minutes long with the bad customer service story that may be 1 or 2 minutes long. And now you got a 3 or 4 minute story. It's not too long if it does the job. Now, let's say you've been invited to be on a panel discussion and you're one of 4 people, and the whole thing is going to be 30 to 40 minutes with some Q&A. For your part, you won't have time to tell a 10-minute story, but a 4-minute story may fit nicely. And think about the questions you may be asked in the Q&A and have a vignette ready to go as an answer. That's a smart thing to do. Now let's talk about another situation, a job interview. This is where a story can get you hired if you're prepared. Now, I've been working with a lot of people lately on their origin story for a job interview. In a job interview, you'll often be asked this question, and I'm sure you've heard it. Tell me something about yourself. What makes you the right person for this position? Now, if you simply recite your qualifications, your curriculum vitae, you're not going to stand out because all of the other candidates have similar qualifications. But if you can tell a personal story about how your life and the obstacles that you've overcome have prepared you for this opportunity, you'll stand out because you're the only one with your life story. Plus, it'll be emotionally compelling and it'll engage their attention. So spend some time working on your story and bring it in around 3, 4, maybe 5 minutes max. Now, let's talk about TED Talks. That's another situation, a very unique situation. I've coached over 40 people on their TED and TEDx talks, and your story can make or break why you get chosen and how well your TED Talk does on YouTube. So let's say you're given a 12-minute time slot. That's pretty average. Within that 12 minutes, your story can take up all 12 minutes of it. It can. Or maybe you only take up 75% of your time with a story, with the other 25% being devoted to some supporting data, facts, or references, maybe some slides or a short video. You can also tell 2 or 3 shorter stories. But I'm going to tell you that that will often dilute the power of one compelling story. Now, you can also learn more about TED Talks by listening to episode 16 of this podcast, titled, So You Want to Give a TED Talk. So go back and listen to episode 16. So you want to give a TED Talk. And for those of you that have dreams of becoming a professional speaker, and boy, oh boy, do I get it. You've probably been inspired like I was by seeing someone give a great motivational keynote at a conference somewhere and thought, well, I can do that. I want to do that. In that case, you've probably seen some speakers tell some amazing stories, long ones that move you to laughter and tears, easily 8 to 12-minute stories. And professionals can get away with that because they've taken the time to script, memorize, and deliver their stories with almost 100% accuracy each time. They take storytelling very seriously because when you're hired to motivate and inspire people and you're being paid $15,000 or more for a 1-hour speech, you can't be sloppy. Your stories have to be amazing, not just good, but amazing, or you won't be able to compete. I know this because when I was attending the National Speakers Association annual conventions every year for over 20 years, I saw some of the best, most amazing speakers and storytellers in the world. And I realized early on that I had to up my game. I mean, I thought I was pretty talented, but when I saw those people, I thought, Douglas, man, you need to be better. You need to up your game. I witnessed people tell well-crafted, brilliantly performed stories that were, well, they were basically mini pieces of theater. Each story was like a short play. So it's not about how long the story is. It's about how amazing the story is at being entertaining, educational, and brilliantly developed. So the answer to how long a story should be is this. It can be as long as it takes to do the job. Some stories just require more time because they're more complex and they require more detail. If you tell what should be a 10-minute story, but you tell it in 5 minutes, you're likely to have people come up to you afterwards asking you lots of questions about your story because you left out so many details, but people feel like they need to get you to fill in the gaps before they can go home. Has that ever happened to you? Well, it's happened to me. You forget something, you leave out some detail, and people have to come up and ask you, well, what happened? How did things work out? Now, on the other hand, if you're one of those people that goes off on tangents and gets lost along the way because you're sloppy and undisciplined and think you're so good that you can just wing it, in that case, I suggest you stop telling annoying stories altogether. Sorry. I just get so triggered by people who waste everyone's time by being self-indulgent. My final thought about how long a story should be is this. Pay attention to what other people around you are doing that works and doesn't work. Learn from their experience. Observe. I know for a fact, because my students have told me, that there are situations where telling a story won't work at all, where the people in the room, high-level executives, will cut you off if you start telling a story. So pay attention and know when to tell a story and when not to. On the other hand, you're listening to me because you want to take storytelling seriously. Am I right? Because you want your stories to stick. So go back and listen to episode 2 titled Story Analysis and apply the 9 steps of story structure to your stories. What you'll discover if you use the 9 steps to craft your story is that your story is going to expand with more detail, more imagery and emotion. It's going to be more dramatic and compelling. And as a result, more memorable. It's going to work. It's going to stick. Every one of my coaching clients, and I've had hundreds, has said that they wish they knew about the 9 steps formula sooner, because it makes it easier to have a really powerful story with all of the right elements in the right sequence, and that the 9 steps are easy to follow. So go back and listen to episode 2, but you can also study the 9 steps in more depth in my book. It's titled Doug Stevenson's Story Theater Method, and you can buy it as a paperback or as an ebook download on Amazon. Also, here's what you need to do. Listen to episode 5 titled What's the Point? And learn how to make the point of your story stick with a phrase that pays. And here's something that you may want to take advantage of. How would you like to hang out with me for free on a free 20-minute Zoom coaching call? Or you can ask me questions or get some quick coaching on one of your stories. Or if you're considering working with me as your keynote or story coach, we can spend some time getting to know each other and see if we're a good fit. So I'm just putting that out there. To schedule your free 20-minute Zoom coaching call, you need to email, not me, but Deborah, my wife and business partner, and the VP of everything. Isn't that a great job title? The VP of everything. So write this down. Here's her email address, Deborah@DougStevenson.com. That's Deborah, DEBORAH, @DougStevenson.com. Send her an email, and in the subject line, write free 20-minute Zoom call. All right. Well, that's it for this episode. Boy, this was fun. If you feel that you learned something valuable today, something that you can use that will make your story stick, stories that make you and your business memorable, marketable, and monetizable, there are 3 things I'd like you to do. First, click on the follow or subscribe button. And second, share this podcast with 3 people. And third, leave a review wherever it is that you're listening to this podcast. And as always, I'd love to hear from you with your questions and comments. Let me know that you're out there listening and learning. And if you want help with your stories, keynotes, or TED Talks, please get in touch with me on LinkedIn. Follow me on LinkedIn, or by sending an email to me at Doug@DougStevenson.com. That's Doug@DougStevenson.com. Hey, thanks for listening. Until next episode, I'm Doug Stevenson.